Miss Funkiness has arrived, back from the future, a Sir Funkadophilus.
There were many events, many things that contributed to the making of Funkadophilus. The first thing that happened was someone was generous enough to hook me up with some tickets to see Bootsy Collins live in Copenhagen, and also helped me to meet him. I got my talk box signed by him. That was just an amazing thing. But there was something else that had happened during Bootsy Collins' show, and he actually went on to explain a little bit about the role of the musicians and the approach that they take on their instruments. And that helped me to put a whole lot of pieces together in terms of my approach when I came back to my studio and wanted had this knee-jerk reaction of inspiration and wanted to kind of answer back to what I saw. I wanted to create something that sounded like it was done by a live band, but sounded like it was old, but maybe digitally remastered recently or something like that. You know, I wanted to create something that would sonically confuse people. It would make people think, when did that come out? When did I miss that? You know, was this out in the 70s or did this come out in the 90s? Or when did this come out? That was sort of the reaction that I wanted to evoke from people. That meant that I had to take an approach in terms of using a lot of live sounding instruments, but without using actual live instruments, because I'm just here in my home studio. First thing I did was pull up a very typical drum kit sound, very dry drum sound, and build a groove with all the elements that I wanted all together. And then from there, I kind of pretty much copied and pasted an arrangement together that I wanted. But then what I did was I went back and did a lot of detailed work, especially with the drums. So I went back with all the drums and made pretty much a different take for every 8 bars. So for every 8 bars of drums, it's a different 8 bars. None of each 8 bars are the same. There's always a little slight difference with all of them. With the percussion, it was pretty simple. I programmed a percussion rhythm, so a bunch of different percussions, congas and claves and guidos and all kinds of things all in one. The bass sound is essentially a very simple bass, live bass sound, so electric bass sound. From there, I bust the sound out to another track and did some very, very destructive plug-in work on that. So I put some fuzz and wah-wahs on it, and there's some chorus and there's some compression and things like that. And then I kind of come up with a mixture of the two. So I make a nice mixture of the clean bass sound and this really dirty, fuzzy wah-wah bass sound, and kind of come up with something new from that. It's very much in the spirit of Bootsy Collins' bass sound in terms of his space bass sound. It's very fuzzy wah-wah sound that he would have on his bass while he's playing as a solo artist. Not to be confused with him when he plays within the band, but when he's playing in front, there's a very distinct sound. So I tried to kind of come up with something that was very reminiscent of that. Brass synth and a simple string synth that was very much in the light of old school P-Funk songs. So that's not really that hard to find these days. You can find it in a lot of different types of software. The same thing with the piano. That's pretty much standard, coming out of Logic. Not much to that. So luckily with technology, software has advanced to a point where it can be very convincing. So drums and percussion and things like that are not really that much of a problem. The same thing with synthesizers. However, horns can be a little bit more difficult to to make it sound really authentic. And so instead of spending so much time on doing that, I was lucky enough to know a very, very, very talented horn player named Lars Wiesing. And so I had already mapped out a horn arrangement just with the corny horn sounds that I was using and sent that over to Lars Wiesing, and he easily recreated that and put his own touch to it. The horns are the only instrument, real live instrument, and that I had sent over to the brass operator to do the work. So he sent everything back to me on a stereo track, and that was just real easy for me to work with. When it comes to the vocal work, what I did there was that I recorded a whole bunch of tracks in different voices, different personalities. Nothing is necessarily planned out of time. I just have a few checkpoints where we all kind of say the same thing at certain times. And it creates this atmosphere, it creates this feeling like there's a party going on. And then I did the main top line where you hear Funkadophilus, the voice of Funkadophilus. And again, that voice is very reminiscent of George Clinton, Bootsy Collins, Sir Nose, all those type of little things. So it's just some little hints of all those really special, legendary things about the P-Funk sound, the P-Funk movement. Coming up with a mix and placement for the song wasn't that hard, but doing a good mastering was something that I really wanted to have another pair of ears from. So I connected with a brother that was out in the north of Sweden, and he had a very good understanding of funk music. He was a dancer back in the day, so he understands some of those values in terms of numerical values, volume values in funk music. And so I specifically asked him to do some mastering work that wasn't necessarily on par with today's standards in terms of loudness and in terms of compression and limiting and things like that. I wanted to keep the dynamics of the song, the dynamics of all the instruments, to make it sound as if you were there, as if you were in a place listening to this, like you're in a live jam or something like that. So even when it comes to the mastering, there is a large part of consideration when it comes to the conception behind the song. For everything to kind of sound authentic, there had to be this story built around the production or built around the sound. Essentially, I would say that this song was an experiment gone right. I think I actually managed to pull something off that I didn't think I would actually be able to pull off. And that brought a lot of confidence in me, but it also brought a lot of confidence in terms of where I can see funk music going. And because of that song, there were a lot of bonds that were made. There were a lot of ideas that came from that. I used that song to compete in a contest on indabamusic.com. You guys should check that out. If you're a home producer or if you're trying to get your game up with your production, check out indabamusic.com. There's a lot of opportunities, remix and original songwriting competitions and all different types of opportunities for you to check out. But anyhow, I entered that song out on an opportunity on Indaba Music, and one of the head honchos of the company, his name is Mantis, and he not only is he a big fan of the funk, but he also happens to be a good friend of Bootsy Collins. And so he was delighted enough to not only hear the song, I managed to win that competition, and he got that song over to Bootsy Collins for him to hear it. And it wasn't that long after I met Bootsy Collins, so just that whole thing, the way it just came full circle for me was just like, okay, success. The song also got around to Walla P of Voyage Funktastic. It's a Canadian faction of the funk based out in Montreal. And him and his network, Dr. Mad, they loved it. And I ended up finally getting out there to meet them. They were actually so stoked about the production of the song. I offered to just open up the session and let them see it. It was right there on my laptop. And so here we are checking out the session of this song. And there were a couple other people there. Shashu was there. And just seeing how inspired people were by the work, how impressed Dr. Mad and Walla P and even Shashu, who I look up to very much, seeing how impressed they were with the work gave me an idea. That in itself gave me an idea I said, well, I can do something where I can show a whole bunch of people how I do stuff and help, inspire more people. And that was basically how I came up with the idea of Behind the Beats and The Way of the Stank. And at that point, I had already came up with some different methods of how I can simplify the production process. And I had no problem opening up a session for people. And so it was actually through Funkadophilus, all these different things had sort of either come about or the idea of something had come about. Lastly, the cover is very significant to me because I'm very much inspired by P-Funk and the movement that they did. For me, it wasn't just the music, it was so many other things that it left the gateway for. And so that was artwork and, cartoons and animations and things like that. And so looking at the cover of Glory Holla Stupid, that was the basic prototype, the blueprint in terms of how I wanted to come up with the cover. So I wanted to I wanted to create a new version of that. Siru and we worked together to take pieces of different characters and capes and pieces here and pieces there and kind of piece together this collage of the silhouette that we really liked, and then sort of came up with something brand new when we started messing around with it in Photoshop. And from there we used some pictures of Lars Wiesing, who named himself the Brass Operator. I was like, cool, that's a cool name, I'll go with that. And so the actual visual part was also another big major inspiration in terms of leaving somewhat of a story behind the sound, right? So not only is Funkadophilus a concept, but it's actually somewhat of a character. It's an alter ego of my own. It's another side of me. It's the part where science and it's the part where history and technology all combine in one to just create the same thing that you've heard over and over and over again for years, but with a completely new process of doing it, with a whole new way of coming to the same result, right? So the basic idea was that we needed live instruments to create this sound, but now you actually don't anymore. You can actually create this type of sound with a computer and make it sound pretty much just as convincing. And so coming to that realization was the part of Funkadophilus, the experiment gone right? So trying to really come to a new place in how we appreciate technology and the way that we use it, and perception of what we hear, what we think we know. And so working with all those different things is Funkadophilus. That is what Funkadophilus is. I hope you guys like today's episode. If there's another song you guys like me to cover later on, let me know. It's Behind the Beats with Temu. See you guys. Peace. 3, 2, 1, here we go.